Hearing okay. And we are live. Very good. Very good. Get the mic here where you can all hear me. So good to be here with you all. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Brian in Virginia is here. Hey there, Brian. Good to see you. Wonderful as always. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Yep. Just checking. Get rid of that. Sound breaking here. Hello from Slovenia, from Life is a Sketch. Patang, Shanatova, Happy New Year. Message of renewal, health and abundance, prosperity and success, peace and tranquility. Thank you, Patang. I think you're in Israel, right? Brian says, yes, can you hear me? Good. Well, we are all set. We are all set. Hi there from Portland, Maine. Hello, October Paul. By all means, please say hello in the chat while we're waiting for people to arrive, and tell me where you're from, and especially if this is the first time you've joined me on Satsang, that would be of real interest to me. I always like to know the people who have never been here before for this kind of thing. Some people maybe for the first time ever being in any satsang with any teacher, and that's pretty cool. Actually, that's pretty amazing. It's a very satsang, as I always like to explain at the beginning, is it's not really a sitting and having a conversation with a teacher who's filling your head with knowledge. It's a setting in which we can artfully question our deepest assumptions about ourselves and discover who we actually are. That's what this is about. This is an ancient practice going back many, many thousands of years in India. I mean, it was the Platonic dialogues. That was how Plato taught. That was how the Greek philosophers taught, not by just dispensing information. As a matter of fact, Plato once said he knew nothing, and he wasn't kidding. It's the question and answer model allows you to simply use our higher reasoning to question our own assumptions about things that, if gone unchallenged, have a profound influence on our lives, because it is our perceptions that determine our experience. I invite anyone who doubts that to simply look for yourself to see, is there any experience that is not perceived? You can even go even further. Is there any experience without consciousness? As far as you're concerned, without consciousness, you don't exist. If a rock doesn't have any consciousness, the rock does not exist to itself. Without consciousness, it is the vehicle of all experience. So we cannot separate consciousness from experience. We cannot separate consciousness from the world. Without us, without the conscious awareness, the universe is stillborn. There's nothing here. There's absolutely nothing here without someone to see it. Now, we imagine that there was, but that imagination is happening within consciousness. It is consciousness imagining what something would be like without it. But yet, without it, it would be a formless mass. There would be no form to speak of. Now, this is really, it's deep stuff to ponder. And the whole point of doing satsang is to ponder these kinds of things. It's not merely about, getting answers to domestic problems and domestic questions and the like. It is about discovering your actual nature and where you actually fit in the whole scheme of things. Because that our sense of self, of course, is our number one perception. It's our number one belief. I'm going to be doing a workshop on this whole subject in about a month or so. I'll be doing one Wednesday for those of you who want to join. It's I'm calling it Gaia's Dream, and it's another workshop about the subject of oneness, which I did about 6 weeks ago. I did one, and I wanted to take it further. I certainly didn't cover all the information I wanted to on the first one, but I wanted to take it further so that we kind of extended this sense of oneness to include everything around us, our relationship to everything around us as the conscious awareness of it. So if you want to join in, it's donation, $1, $1 million is the largest I will receive. So can't give me any more than that. But the lowest is $1. That's the lowest the system will let me accept. So just go to gpwalsh.com/Gaia. I'll put it here in the chat. .com/Gaia. If you want to go. If you want to join me, that's this coming Wednesday. Let's see. Namaste from Poland, of course. And says Evan or Eva Evans, friend. Johanna says hello from Mexico. Hi, Johanna. Ursula, hello from Madeira Island. Hello. David and Elaine, hi GP, and all greetings from Southeast England. Good to be here and see and hear you. Good to have you. Rohan from Still Bay, hi G, hi Rohan. Still Bay, South Africa. Can't stop smiling. Wonderful. October Paul says, I had a non-abiding intuitive experience a few years ago. Then I was thrust into the dark night of the soul. How do I move to a place of abiding awareness? The only way we can come to it be established in the truth of our genuine nature, the reality of our being as pure consciousness, is to recognize that that is what has always been true. And that it is the other, the struggling, the fearful, the lacking, the seeking self, the seeking mind, that is the imposition. That's the imposter. So now notice, your question assumes that you are separate from the ultimate reality, the ultimate non-dual, non-abiding, intuitive experience, that you are separate from that, and that you, that was separate from that, had an experience of it, and now is seeking to get to it, right? Now, when an experience like that happens, it's not actually an experience. It's the falling away of experiencing, and you are simply yourself. And that's what it feels like to simply be yourself. So you as the true self are not an experience. You are the one having the experience. But the experience itself, when identified with, makes it feel as if, and makes us perceive as if, we have become separated from it. Once you get a glimpse of that and taste its sweetness, but then that sense of the separate self arises again, And we have not yet matured to the point that we see it as that our real position is the true self, and that the sense of a separate self arising is being experienced and not actually something pulling you in. You're not actually in it. It is an experience happening in consciousness. The contrast between the sweetness of what is experienced in that realization and uh, the depravity, the pain, the suffering, the pettiness of the separate self just stands out in sharp relief. And when there's still remaining identification with that, it's horrible. It's a dark night of the soul. It's extremely painful. And that is when people start vigilantly seeking. Now, obviously, the seeking is something we have to do. It's a phase that everyone has to go through. But the seeking actually has an ending. And the ending isn't when what is sought is found, because that would mean that it could again be lost. But when the whole sense of being separate simply falls away, and you realize that you have always been that. You've never been separated. You never had a dark night of the soul, because you were never separated from the self in the first place. The true awakening is a realization of what has always been. It is not the acquisition of some kind of a special state. The truth can never become false, and a falsity can never become true. The truth of your being is forever. It cannot stop. It cannot change. It cannot be altered. However, just the nature of the dynamic consciousness, it can be obscured. Just the way that the clouds will block the sun, or your thumb. You can hold up your thumb and block the entire sun with this little thumb here. So how do I move to a place of abiding awareness? Recognize that you've never left there. And let your approach to spirituality, to inquiry, to looking at your thoughts and your emotions, be from the place of the true self. So when you're sitting down to eat, it is the true self eating. When you're working, it is the true self working. When you are praying, it is the true self praying. When you are dancing, it is the true self dancing. Right? That is who you are, and that is the realization. That's why it's not an attainment. It's not something we get. It's not something that we have to hold on to. It's not something that comes and goes. It's you. Again, St. Francis of Assisi, that's my granddaughter crying, by the way. St. Francis of Assisi said, what you are looking for is where you are looking from. I'm going to shut the window. So it's really the starting point, and a lot of spiritual practices have gotten off base because there's been this assumption that I have become separated from the ultimate, from God, and that I've got to do something to mend the schism. And that's where all practices come from. That's where, the progressive path, which is the general path of spirituality and various spiritual practices. It can be, decades, months, sitting in a monastery, chanting Om. All of these things, they start with an idea of a separate self that can somehow be spiritualized and purified, and therefore eventually earn Buddhahood. It is the non-dual, the Zen, that says, no, it's a sudden realization. It is the realization that who you thought you were, you're not. It is the falling, it is the dissolution of an illusion. Now, believe me, when the realization dawns for pretty much everyone, it is not the final curtain like that. It doesn't happen immediately. But a fundamental shift takes place in our perception where we stop the act of trying to acquire. we stop the act of trying to acquire our true self. And we recognize that that's who we've always been. Those are the eyes through which we are seeing, that the consciousness that is aware of everything around me, no matter what the circumstances might be, is the consciousness. And at that point, you begin to become incredibly compassionate and gentle and loving with all of the thoughts and feelings and sensations that have been identified with and acting out the sense of a separate self for your whole life, for lifetimes. And therefore that momentum is still there. Now, without the vision dawning, that momentum will just continue. The identification will continue, and it will go on lifetime after lifetime. But with that awakening, that non-abiding experience, you see that isn't actually who you are. But because that's who you believed yourself to be, your energy system, the nervous system, conformed to that and acted it out. And so now a very fundamental shift has taken place in perspective. It's going to take some time for that to kind of seep in and begin to permeate all the cells, the behaviors. And it's simply a matter of staying in self-abiding. The self-abiding is, oh, I am the self. I am the self that is having the experience. I am not the experience. I am not my thoughts. I am not my emotions. I am not my sensations. I am the witness of them. And that opens up this enormous space of love and acceptance in which the nervous system can begin to kind of dismantle its own creations and begin to reorganize around this new vision you're holding of yourself. A vision that isn't just a vision. It's just not a better belief. It's not just an improved version of you. It's not just you 2.0. It's the real you. And it always starts as just that insight of, oh, I'm not that. I am something completely different. I am consciousness. And it could be a fleeting moment, right? It can be something you hear with the mind and it feels true, but you can't even understand it. And the mind doesn't even have a hard time hold it. That's all it takes. Truth is like water. If there's an opening at all, it'll go through. So does that help you, October Paul? Please let me know. It's a great question, and I hope the answer was equal to it. But it's the point I always try to get back to. You are not trying to become who you, the Buddha. You are the Buddha. There's another question there about Buddha. I'll take it now, and I'll go back to life as a sketch. I won't skip it. Jaya Devon says, "Hi G, what is the ultimate Buddhahood you talk about?" It's that. It's just that. The recognition that it's what you've always been. So that when you're meditating, it's Buddha meditating. When you're eating, it's Buddha eating. The separate self really does not exist. It is just a thought, believed, projected upon experience, and now experience appears to conform to this idea of there being a separate self. So now we're a seeker, and but the moment that stops, the moment you realize that's not true, you have turned around, you're headed in the other direction. At the other end of that is Buddhahood. But it is the Buddhahood that started the whole thing in the first place. I mean, even the desire to seek was a very diluted proof of Buddhahood simply asserting itself as you. It is grace. It is when there's simply nothing left of the sense of there being any separation whatsoever. The infinite universe is my body. It is not something out there separate from me, nor is it nothing. Will it disappear and I'm just going to go off into this void because everything's an illusion and there won't be anything at all? It's not that either. It is the entire manifest universe as the mirror reflection of the indivisible, indescribable whole that is your true being. And that's Buddha nature, and that's Buddhahood. Realization is Buddhahood. In the Lankavatara Sutra, it says beautifully, truth is the body of a Buddha. So just chew on that for a little bit. Truth is your body. Life is a sketch. Can you explain something about Tantra, sexuality, transforming it into love? Must we avoid sex to become more spiritual, to become enlightened? Thanks, G. God, I hope not. Otherwise, I'm screwed. No, of course not. You know, celibacy is certainly not part of my teaching. And I can tell you for a fact, I went through a period of time where I did do that. I thought, nothing, minimize sensation, minimize pleasures, minimize pain, minimize everything, right? A renunciation. And I lived like a monk. Guess what? Didn't work. Doesn't work, right? You can just try it for yourself. It does not work. To avoid anything of life is to make there be something wrong with life. That is the rejection of Gaia, which I'm doing the workshop on. It is the rejection of the motherhood of creation. It is the rejection of the divine feminine, which is the creative energy, creating and nurturing. It is a rejection of life. Tantra is just a holistic approach for it that's been around for a long time, and like everything else in the West, it gets reduced to its lowest common denominator. Yoga got reduced to exercise, and there's 6 paths to yoga. Tantra got reduced to clever sex techniques, which is a small part of it. What it really is about, it's Tantra and Vedanta are brother and sister, are man and wife, right? Vedanta, the non-dual inquiry, like we do here, is the masculine precision, the masculine directness, right? Whereas Tantra is the living of life, right? It is a complete and total acceptance of life. It is the emergence in life. Now, if you have both of those, if you have the wisdom that has pierced the veil of the illusion, and then at the same time, you have the openness of living as a human being with everything that involves, you find the bliss of life. Life becomes sacred. Sex becomes sacred. It becomes a moment of intimacy. It's not a commodity anymore. It's not a bargaining chip. It's not a deal. It's not an objectification. It has no goal other than the moment, and the moment is simply communion with the sacred communing with the sacred. It turns the water into wine. It brings heaven down to earth. That's what Tantra is actually about. But of course, in this culture, everything becomes commoditized. Everything is to sell. There's no heart. There's no soul left in this Western culture. It's pretty much dead, right? But we're bringing life. We're trying to clear. We're trying to bring life back into that which has lost it. So traditional Tantra was a path of self-discovery. It was one of the many paths. Without Vedanta, which is the direct path inquiry, it can get lost in form and in ritual and things like, and a lot of it has. But with that informing it, you have the perfect marriage of compassion and wisdom. Right? You have Kanon, the goddess of compassion and wisdom, and it was a goddess, right? And she is both the goddess of wisdom and of compassion, because you really can't separate the two. And that's what we try to do. We try to separate. We separate everything. Everything's about being separate. That's why these workshops I'm doing on oneness are so meaningful to me, because that's what we do. We separate sex from life. We've turned it into a commodity, right? It's got a special place. You gotta, in the meantime, we're just starving for attention. We're starving for touch. We're starving for affection. But that's what happens when a culture becomes divorced from nature. And to become divorced from nature is to abandon the God. It's to abandon the feminine principle. That's really the reason why women have been subjugated, because the whole goddess element was completely wiped out in the Abrahamic religions, which is Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Wiped out. There was no longer the balance of energies of gods and goddesses. It was one God. I'm it. You cannot have any other gods other than me, and I'm a guy. Got it? I mean, harsh as the day is long. So what we're seeing in this revival is a revival of life, the celebration of life. And when even something like sexuality, which is so intimate and so dear to us and so necessary to us, loses that connection, that's when you get pornography, you get prostitution, you get the commodification, you get Jeffrey Epstein, and pedophile. I mean, it gets completely distorted because it has no contact with anything substantial anymore. And so something like Tantra brings us back to the actual nature of things, the actual nature and embracing of the human, not a rejection of the human. A lot of spirituality is a rejection. Neo-Advaita says there's nobody here, there's nothing to do, no one's doing anything, right? Nothing is real. It is an ignorant rejection of humanity, whereas genuine spirituality is an embracing of humanity. It's taken in to the big picture of the ultimate emptiness, the ultimate fullness of life. It is simply not seen any longer as being separate from life or separate from consciousness. It is seen as one with consciousness. This is consciousness in its emptiness form, which is the pure absolute awareness. And then there's consciousness in the dynamic form, which is the infinite and eternal universe, forever unfolding, forever a reflection of that which is beyond what anything can be said about it. The Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. That's the Tao. But the Tao there's not the Tao and then this. The Tao is all of it. So does that answer it for you? Life is a sketch. By all means, do not give up sex thinking it's going to make you enlightened. It's not going to work. I mean, Buddha realized that, right? That was the. I saw it depicted beautifully in a movie called Little Buddha, actually, and after his 6 years of utter austerity, now he did it. He went without everything. I mean, he ate very little, just enough to barely keep alive. He was emaciated. Don't bathe. Don't wear clothes. Don't cut your hair. So. At the end of this, he's just laying almost dead by the side of the side of a river. And in the story, a boat comes down the river, in the boat is a man giving a lesson to, I don't know, lute or koto, or whatever. It was a stringed instrument, and the man said to a younger boy, and he said, if you tie it too tight, it'll break. If it's too loose, it won't make a sound. You have to tune it exactly the right frequency. And it's that when, according to that, he realized that he had been pulling it so tight it was just going to break. And at that moment, a young girl came up and brought him this milk thing. It was kind of a dessert, actually. It's kind of like equivalent of our ice cream, which he then ate. And then he went and sat down under the Bodhi tree and said, I'm not getting up until I have the solution to suffering. And he left. As a matter of fact, when he did that and ate that food, he'd already collected followers. They abandoned him because he had broken with that tradition. It doesn't work. There is no pain you can or deprivation you can inflict on yourself that will facilitate enlightenment. It is a matter of grace. Recognize who you are and stay with it. You are the self. Be the self. Think like the self. Breathe like the self. Act like the self. Make love like the self. Right? Which means you're not trying to get anything. It's all outward flowing love. How's that for you? Life is a sketch. A beautiful sketch too. Let's see. Oh my goodness. I just got a 1,000. I'm going kind of slow today, aren't I? Roman, it looks like that consciousness mostly is looking in the play of Leah for limitation and not for peace, isn't it? Well, put it this way. While bliss is the natural state, for lack of a better word, of the true self, suffering is the natural state of the ego. Desire and fear are the natural states of the ego, of the egoic mind, the limited sense of self. Now, it too is a form of consciousness, right? But it's a very outlined, a very it's stuck. I mean, it's consciousness in a little jar. Good. It feels really crowded in here. So I think Eckhart Tolle explained it very well when he was talking about the pain body. It feeds on pain. The ego feeds on suffering. It needs it, either its own or someone else's, right? But it needs that because it's just trying to establish itself. If there's no suffering, then what is there for it to do? What role does it play? What is it? It's nothing at all. So it gravitates towards misery because that's its nature, right? It's not like it's not like it's sitting over here. Gee, I really want I really want to be miserable today, right? Because nobody says that, and in fact, the mind is. Thinks it's doing exactly the opposite, but it's inevitable that it is going to create chaos wherever it goes because it's not real, because it's not substantial. It's never going to feel. It cannot feel comfortable. And so when you are identified with the separate self, you will feel that discomfort as if it was your own. Now remember that the separate self isn't real. There's nobody there. There's not a sentient being that is feeling. It is a mistaken sense of identity, which consciousness, which is real and which does feel and which is sentient, identifying with, feels like it is that. That's the power of identification. I become it. We see this in really, really good actors. and actresses, I guess the term is generic now, actor goes either gender, where they are so engaged in the part that they literally become it. And I saw once the most beautiful, it was Sir Laurence Olivier, one of the greatest actors of all time. And he was, they filmed him as he was doing one of his, King Lear, one of the Shakespearean things. But they just filmed him in the dressing room as he was getting ready, putting on his makeup. And it was amazing. It took about an hour for him to put on all the makeup and all the stuff that he had to do. But as he was doing it, he was becoming the character. And by the time it was done, he stood up, and goddamn if it wasn't King Lear. I mean, the king stood up. It was like, whoa. I mean, it was an amazing thing to behold, because he completely assumed that form. Now, what would happen if one night something in his mind just kind of like popped, and he kept thinking he was King Lear, and that the tragedy he'd been through was actually his tragedy, and this suffering and these conflicts were all his conflicts? Somebody would have to come along and say, Larry, hold on, stop for a second. Are you really, what's all this suffering about? Well, I've got all these problems. But wait a minute, are those really your problems? And maybe somebody, a non-dual teacher can come in and talk him down, talk him back into who he actually was, that he had just kind of gotten into this. But while you're in there, everything is seen through those eyes, right? So there's all these problems and difficulties and struggles, and I'm trying to make things right, but these people are getting in my way. Right? Are you following what I'm saying? Are you following the line here? We simply got lost in an identity of our own creation, and the moment I believe that's who I actually am, this comes to life, just like the actor gives life to the character. And, if you see a really good actor, if they're a movie star, it's, you know who it is. If you see Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger, or Tom Cruise, it's Tom Cruise. But when you see a fantastic actor, somebody like Anthony Hopkins, you forget Anthony. You don't see Anthony Hopkins. He's not there. It's completely this character, and this is a good metaphor for what we are dealing with. The separate self is a thought. It is an idea that, once it's believed, creates an identity. And when I have that sense of identity, I will be that. And of course, what Buddha meant, talks about Buddha nature, is that is not who you are. You never were. You just think you are. And that's why realization is not an acquiring of something. It is a recognition that I have never been who I thought I was. Does that help you, Roman? Does that answer it for you? So as long as I am, King Lear, I'm going to seek tragedy, right? As long as I am, if I think I am this person, I'm going to be acting out like that person. I'm going to be struggling with that person. I'm going to try to improve that person. I'm going to meditate with that person. I'm going to do all sorts of things. And of course, it's never going to work because you're not that person. Does that do it for you, buddy? Chris Gill, hello Chris, hello G. I hear finite can only know the finite. How is that possible? If we're talking about the infinite right now, through the finite mind, I hear awareness only knows awareness, and mind cannot know it. Can the mind know awareness, but not actually know it? All right. We can talk about the finite and the infinite now, Because we are the infinite. You are the infinite. That's how you can recognize the infinite and the finite. If you were just the finite, you could not recognize it. When we talk about the mind cannot recognize, remember, the mind isn't the thing that's recognizing. Consciousness is the sentience. That's the animating power. Consciousness is what recognizes, not the mind. Consciousness recognizes mind. And what is mind? It's just a collection and pattern of thoughts. That's all it is. It never recognizes anything. Does a thought recognize that it's a thought, right? No, it is void of consciousness. It does not know itself. There's nothing there. The knower is the one that is aware of the thought. The thoughts come and go to consciousness. Therefore, mind is never aware of anything. Now, when we talk about the mind not knowing the infinite, when we look at, it's not that it's an entity that can't know it, right? It's just mind. Look at mind as a function. It's simply the function, description and comparison of memory, of a bunch. It's just a function. It's not a thing. Patterns of thought, patterns of belief, right? When you look at those patterns of belief, and I just completely lost my train of thought. Where was I going with it? All right. The mind cannot know it. So when you look at those patterns of belief and those patterns of thought, you realize that they're all by nature, they are relative. They are dual, right? I mean, mind can only describe one thing in terms of another. This is wet, this is dry. This is cool, this is hot. This is fun, this is boring, right? It cannot define anything without having two things to contrast, right? So the infinite cannot be known as an object. So it is outside the realm of the functioning of mind. That's what it means by mind does not know it. When you see the mind as a thing that knows or doesn't know, is ignorant or smart, you've missed the point. That's not mind. Mind is simply a mindless process, patterns of thought. But the nature of those patterns of thought are pretty much descriptive, right? Describing this in terms of that. And so it cannot possibly take in something which is beyond all description, something that is one without a second. And the infinite has no opposite that you can compare it to. So even saying the opposite of the infinite is finite is inaccurate. Infinite includes the finite. It must. Otherwise, it's not infinite. Right? It can't be like it's infinite everywhere except for a little space here, right? Everything is infinite, well, except right here inside this skin, right? That's all infinite. I'm not, right? I mean, you can see how absurd it is. So the mind never knows awareness. Awareness knows awareness, right? Are you aware? That's awareness. Can something that is not aware know awareness? So awareness is aware of itself right now. You knowing you exist is not somebody aware of their existence, but it is awareness aware of itself. The sense of a separate self makes us think that there's me. I'm a localized consciousness or awareness, and I'm trying to get in touch with the big awareness. Well, it's either awareness or it's not. You can't have two awarenesses, one looking over there and one looking over here. Consciousness cannot be localized any more than space can be localized. You can't have a boundary on space, right? Put an object in space, but is the space inside the object any different than the space outside of it? It's just a perception. It's a distortion of perception. You following? Okay, cool. Chris, I love you. Sean O'Flaherty, another great video. I'm a big fan of your work. Thank you. Shane, not Sean, Shane. Oh, you must have watched because I have that little 3-minute video on the page there, gpwalsh.com/Gaia, where you sign up. I have that video that I make, which is an excerpt from parts of the workshop. Sean, a revolutionist. Hi, G, from Scotland. Some days I forget the whole message and feel dumb. I'm going to crack a few beers and enjoy anyway, my friend. Yes, forgetfulness arises. But are you not aware of forgetfulness? Right? I mean, really look, folks. Don't look at the quality or character or content of what you are experiencing. Just look at the fact that you never stop experiencing, right? Awareness is aware of everything, the good, the bad, the up, the down, all the opposites. That's why it is beyond the opposites. That's why it's impossible to put into words, because the words are always something about contrast. It is beyond all opposite. It is that which perceives opposites, which means it's sitting in a different place, right? It's not made of the same substance of it. So yeah, crack a few beers, enjoy away, enjoy anyway, right? And just notice that all of that couldn't be happening were there not consciousness there to experience it. The forgetting of the message couldn't arise if there wasn't consciousness there to experience it. Now, identification comes along and says, I, consciousness, have forgotten the message. And that too is simply an idea, another modulation of thought arising in front of consciousness. And so, and the whole seeking, I'm seeking, the ultimate awareness. And of course, the seeking of the ultimate awareness is being viewed by the ultimate awareness, because where else is it happening? Is anything happening outside awareness? Now, just look at it from your personal. Don't imagine, well, it stops here, and there's all these things, stuff going on in China. I don't know anything about it, right? Forget about that. Just look at your experience, from your experience, without any idea about anything else. Just look exactly what you are experiencing. Is there anything that is not appearing in awareness? That's how you do it. That's how you dismantle this thing. For the longest time, I used to think that all these things that I come to see were supposed to have this magnificent effect on the content of my experience. And it did. It had huge impacts on the content of my experience, but I was always expecting something more. It was Zen really that taught me the middle way, the way that is beyond all opposites. And that opened the door for Advaita, Vedanta for me. But that's the prajnaparamita. It is the wisdom that takes you to the other shore. It is the wisdom that is beyond all opposites. It has gone completely beyond what can possibly be articulated. Right? So who is it that's looking at you, forgetting the whole message? Is the truth of you dependent upon whether it's running through your mind in any given moment? Do you need to think it in order for it to be true? Do you need to believe it in order for it to be true? That is the difference between a belief and the truth. A belief requires somebody to believe in it in order for it to have any existence. Truth requires nothing and no one. Nobody needs to believe the truth, and it's still true. And it cannot be destroyed. That's the message for all the manipulators of opinion and the offenders of the Holy Spirit who are just trying to brainwash us all into becoming slaves. They're destined for failure, because even though they control all the media, they control the outlets, they're controlling the narrative about everything, deceptive, dishonest, liars, you cannot make a truth false, and you can't make a falsity true. Eventually, that's what Jesus meant when he was talking about the end of the world. And he said, you see this temple here? There's not one stone set upon another that shall not be torn down. He wasn't talking about the destruction of the temple. He was talking about the destruction of the human sense of existence, of the separate self, the entire superstructure on which it lives, and the culture and society that horrendously awful belief has created as its own reflection. Does that answer it for you, Sean? Sarah San says, hi, G. It's wonderful to be here with you and our tribe. Love you, G. I love you too, Sarah. Hey, I'm from France. Yes, I know. She's wonderful. She's originally from Texas, though, now living in France, which makes her really interesting. Teresa says, Croydon, Greater London. Hi there. Great, 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 great. Wonderful. Shane says, I have a question. Is that a question? Have you attracted good things in your life by just feeling good? Thank you. Yeah. Namely feeling good, right? One of the things, because I occasionally will do something that has to do with manifestation and the law of attraction and the like, which, I try to give it the slant that it really deserves. Interestingly enough, Eckhart Tolle is doing about conscious manifestation. He's doing a workshop starting in a couple weeks, an online workshop on manifestation. But he's a non-dual teacher, so it should be a very interesting thing. But remember, if everything we seek in life, everything, relationships, work, career, success, notoriety, money, are all that we seek them because we are all convinced that if we get them, we will be happy. It is happiness, that the feeling of contentment that we all seek. We seek it in things, and of course that's a huge mistake, because even if we get it, it's not going to be long lasting. It's going to go. And the whole nature of the separate self, the sense of a separate self, is one of discontent. It cannot possibly be content because, well, there's nothing there. There's nothing of substantial. There's nothing, no place you can stand, right? So, what we are looking for is happiness, the good feeling of happiness. And like St. Francis of Assisi said, what you're looking for is where you are looking from. So when you are miserable, don't you kind of tend to attract miserable events into your life? Or should I say, even a neutral event will look miserable to you. Your whole perspective, your whole perception is now seen through this idea through this position of being miserable. And so everything looks miserable. Now, contrast that with something just wonderful just happened. Maybe you fell in love or something, right? Does anything look ugly when you're falling in love? Does anything bother you? Everything just goes right past. Nothing matters. Now, what's the difference? Same life, same experiences. What's the difference? Our perspective. Now, which one of those, the miserable one or the loving one, which one of those is simply more attractive in the world? And just practical, everyday life. Nothing metaphysical, no special laws of attraction, the genie of the universe and all of that. Which is more attractive, a happy person or a miserable person? I mean, it's obvious. If you contact and establish and really become rooted in your true nature, which is happiness, simply that, you become attracted because everybody wants it, and they're going to be drawn to it. The problem is that we've just all been convinced that it lies where it doesn't, and that's inherent. I mean, it's the worst now that it's ever been, in countries like this one, where it's nothing internal. It's always get more of this, get more of that. We're destroying the planet trying to satisfy this insatiable hunger. And there's so many people profiting so hugely from it now. Won't even want to entertain the idea that we're basically, not only we're destroying the planet, we're never going to succeed at what it is we're trying to do. Boom, you can turn the attention back inside. Well, then where does happiness really lie? Where does it come from? And that's why I'll do a video about just feeling good. or the one about teleporting, which is kind of visualization on steroids. We actually live in that space. The point was not to get that space and therefore get happiness. It's to begin to realize that by just thinking about it, I can generate that feeling. Well, then the feeling lies in me. And that's the big illusion. I think if I get something and now I'm happy, the mind thinks, oh, getting things makes me happy. No, getting things temporarily satisfies desire. And then when that desire, the intense suffering of desiring, has been satiated for a moment, happiness arises because it's been there the whole time. Here I am. Ah, man, this feels really great, until the next desire comes up. Happiness shrinks back down again because it's been covered up. Because the mind has become trained to think, oh, it's there. I get it there. It's outside of myself. And so life becomes seeking, constantly seeking. And the same thing happens then when people turn to spirituality. We realize it's not there, but we don't know where it is yet. And so now we seek God, or we seek enlightenment, or we seek, it's all you. You are created the entire superstructure. So yes, by all means, choose the good thought, the happy thought over the sad thought. Choose the happy feeling over the sad feeling. But you'll never be completely successful at that as long as you believe yourself to be the separate self. Because this nature of the separate self is misery. It is discontent by nature. Is that answered for you, Shane? Sarah says, you should take a tour this spring and summer and visit us here in Europe. You're absolutely right. And then maybe I'll just kind of disappear and never come back. Okay. Bo Snartsky, Namaskar, GP. Greetings from British Columbia. Hello, Bo. Parmi, hey, GP. Namaste from London, UK. Namaste to you. October Paul. I am very grateful for your wise response. Very good. Grateful for you, my friend. Dave and Elaine, my buddies in the south of England. The Akur and Hurani, did I say that right? Hurani Indians believe the dream state is more real than the waking state, as the mind appears more present in the waking state and gradually dissolves through the dream state. And deep sleep. Can lucid dreaming and sleep yoga be useful for exploring our true nature? Many thanks. In some cases, but because I know you two guys, no, it's not useful for you. Because those are all experiences. The message of all of that, and yes, I think you could easily see, we just kind of inherited this culture with this huge emphasis on, the conscious and the material and physical world and all these things, and it kind of a dismissal of dreams and the like, except, in some kind of psychological context like Freud or something like that. But you could easily see how somebody in a completely different culture, without any of the context that we in the West have, could look on dreams and the waking state as just two aspects, two different realities that they play in. Shamans see it that way. So the thing is that we've just become so convinced that this is the solid reality that we don't realize that we're moving through different realities all the time. Every time I get my attention focused on something, my whole world is now on what I'm focused on, and this is all gone, right? Then I come back, oh, there's this world, and this is over here, and I got this candle going here. Oh yeah, I have some tea here I completely forgot about, right? So now this is my world, right? And so, you go to sleep at night and you have a dream. In the dream, it's completely real. It's an actual experience. It doesn't get called unreal or a dream until you transition into the waking state. And of course, about the state of dreamless sleep, nothing can be said about at all. Right? We don't remember anything. Well, why? Because there was nothing to remember. No events took place. No images appeared. No sounds appeared. So there was no time. There was nothing to measure. That's why you fall into a deep sleep. All of a sudden, 4 hours later, no sense of time whatsoever. It's gone because there was nothing marking time, right? So lucid dreaming is an attempt, I think, to try for the separate self to try to get control over the dream world, which is far more interesting if you can. The things you can create there, they don't have limits. They're not limited by physics, right? There's no gravity. You don't need wings to fly. You don't need a process to transform that into that. And if you get control of that, you're a bit of a wizard, right? But it doesn't reveal the truth. The truth is never in the experience. The truth is always the one having the experience. It's always the consciousness in which this experience appears. That's where your sense of self has to go. When that is established, all the rest of it becomes interesting. It may have uses, it may not. It may be a skillful means that you can take advantage of. I don't interpret dreams, and every now and then somebody will ask me to do it. And in the moment I'm asked, the interpretation comes to me. I have no idea what it is. It just kind of appears. Oh, I think it means this for you. I think this is what it might be trying to tell you. Right? Other times, it means nothing at all. It's just, stuff that's processing through. And don't forget, our minds are storytellers, right? They take little fragments and put it together to make a narrative because they want a story. They want to complete it. They don't like the emptiness of nothing, of the nothingness. There can even be some resistance into falling into the dreamless sleep because it doesn't want to let go. So, is that answered for you, Dave, Helene? Dave Rose, hi GP, glad to be here. Always enjoy listening. Always enjoy speaking. Thank you, David. Robert Hill, hi, Mr. G. Hi, Mr. R. I feel really guilty for smoking. Can't seem to quit at the moment. Every time I smoke, I basically avoid my kids, everyone, everything for those 10 minutes. I have a daughter of 3 and a son of 6 months. It's a lot of work. I love them so much. I'm so happy. Good. Good. The guilt was there before the smoking. All addictions are a result of the disconnection to yourself, to your soul. They are addictions aren't a problem. The addiction is a solution to a problem. The problem with the addiction is that you're scratching your nose when your arm itches. They don't actually scratch the itch, right? But hey, look, if I'm struggling or I'm suffering, and I remember when I started doing drugs back when I was a teenager. I remember the first time I got high. It was the first time, I was 15. It was the first time in my life I could remember not feeling afraid and on edge. It completely dissolved away the normal vigilance and anxiety that I lived with my whole life because of basically my mother's illness. And it was just completely unstable and not being welcome and not being loved, all of that kind of stuff. Well, all I had to do is, puff on some Acapulco Gold, and I actually felt content. I didn't feel afraid. Is it any wonder that I started doing it all the time and everything else I could get my hands on, stronger things, better things, right? I didn't want to go back, and I probably for 4 years straight, I was never straight. Right? Why would I be? It would be, it would, I mean, why would that be, wouldn't be a much better choice than what I was experiencing? Well, of course, the problem is that it is temporary. And you can't avoid the negative consequences of it. And while it certainly was a relief, a huge relief for a period of time, the real issues, the self-hatred, the lack of love, the anxiety, the fear, the instability, they were still there. They had been covered up, they'd been masked, but they were still there. And at that time, I didn't have the capacity to deal with any of that. I didn't know then what I know now, right? And so I just was dependent on that, and I would have probably stayed dependent on it. I do know people who kept it up for 30 years. I probably would have stayed on it if it too didn't fail me. And eventually, after about 2 years, hitting a high note, it just started to deteriorate, and I got darker and darker and angrier and bitter and like more cynical and unpleasant, to the point where my very best friend in the entire world told me to go away. He could not stand being with me, and he said nobody else can either. And they were absolutely right. And I just kind of disappeared into the woodwork by myself, and eventually one thing led to another, where I was just on the verge of just not wanting to live anymore, when the experience that many of you know about, the night on the bridge, where there was the divine intervention, which completely set my feet on a different path, a path that has led here. So that's a very long way of saying is that be more interested in discovering the pain that you need to compensate with the smoking than trying to get rid of the smoking. Because if you get rid of the smoking, but you haven't actually found the pain that it's a compensation for, you'll find something else, right? It may be something that's not as destructive to health, maybe something maybe less expensive, right? Could be more expensive, can be shopping, can be credit cards, can be TV, can be surfing the internet, can be Facebook, right? I mean, there's an infinite variety of things, all just happy to let us distract ourselves from our pain. Put your attention there. So whenever, and it gets a little cloudy, right? When you get into an addiction now, let's say you have that feeling of wanting a cigarette, and you want to just kind of sit with that, right? Right now, at this point, there's a certain amount of physical addiction. Fortunately, for both cigarettes and alcohol, and I mean hard drugs like heroin and that have a very severe withdrawal. Whereas alcohol and cigarettes, it's actually only a couple days that it takes for it to work out of the body, and the physical withdrawals aren't there anymore. But but this thing has integrated into your life, right? It's become associated with things. People have dinner, they want to have a cigarette after dinner, or they want to drink with dinner. They can't imagine drink with dinner without a drink. All sorts of things get associated. Now, that's different. That's in an emotional attachment, right? So the moment you turn from feeding any addiction, at first the uncomfortable feeling will be simply from the addiction itself and not the underlying pain that caused it, right? So there's a certain amount where you're just kind of like being with that, right? And being with lovingly being with yourself, recognizing, St. Paul said, there is no temptation taken you that is not common to man. And just simply become more interested in finding out what was really at the heart of this thing. And who am I really? The true self is not attached or addicted to anything. Even this is an appearance arising in front of awareness. And in order for it to persist, you have to identify with the addicted one. It is nothing but a sensation. It is nothing but a habit of thought and of sensation. Right? It does not have the authority that it appears to. It's not going to be able to hurt you, even if you have intense feelings. It's not going to be able to take anything from you. And here's the big one. The fact that you acquired an addiction is absolutely no reflection on your character. That's what hurts. That's why we're embarrassed. I shouldn't be that way. Oh, duh. I mean, come on. It's an addictive substance. It's sold as an addictive substance. They know it's an addictive substance. You're supposed to get addicted. That's what it's from. And then they want to blame you for the addiction. I mean, it's devilish. It's devilish, really, you know. Something inside of you needed some satisfaction. That cigarette gave it to it for a moment. It's just not, it just can't do anything of it. It's not a reflection on you. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just fine. You know, you're just fine. It can't get in the way of anything. It can't get in the way of you being a good father. It can't get in the way of your love. It can't get in the way of your awakening. So do not let it become, don't let the mind turn it into there's something wrong with you. Your character is bad and you're not going to be good. You're not going to be valuable until you don't do it anymore. Claim your value, your inherent value, the value of being who you actually are. the Christ mind, the Buddha nature, and let that recognition clear away everything that is foreign to it. That means clearing out of you. Does that help, Robert? Where are we at? 2:13. Okay. Eternal inside. Hello, GP. I have a question that probably can't be answered. Why Brahman chose to put us in this misery world where one creature eats the other and humans live a painful life? I think, it's interesting. I heard an interview with Joseph Campbell, and he asked, he met Krishna Atmananda, a great non-dual teacher in India. And he had an interview with him. And he asked him pretty much the same question. All the brutality, the stupidity, all of the things going on in the world, how can we possibly accept it? How can we possibly deal with this? How can we possibly make any sense of this? And Atmananda's response was simply that right now, in this place where we are as human beings, you and I have to accept it. There's something we just have to kind of stop railing against it, stop fighting it. Don't mean, just let it continue and all that, but just surrender to what is happening and allow yourself the opportunity for your perceptions of what are happening to fall away so that you can actually see what's happening, right? Now, I'm not saying that when that happens, everything's going to be lovely and great and beautiful. It might, right? But there is a surrendering to life as it actually is. Interestingly enough, after the interview is over and Joseph was talking to some other people, one of the people, the followers, and he said to him that when Atmananda had first gone to visit his guru, it was exactly the same question he asked his guru. it is kind of this question of why one creature has to live by another dying. When we actually look at the tragedy, the suffering that is life, we have to take pause. We have to go, whoa, what is going on here? And if we really grasp that, if we really take that into our hearts and minds, we're going to be communing with the spirits, the gods, the forces, our ancestors, because this is the question that has driven religious and spiritual inquiry from the get-go. You know, why is it like that? And if you look at primitive cultures, I use that word very loosely. They're not primitive. They're very sophisticated. They're not technologically advanced like the Native Americans and various Aboriginals around the world. Everything to them it becomes sacred. When they would, you know, kill to eat, there was a ritual, right? Because they recognized very much that this animal was dying so that I could live. Same thing, even the plants were dying so that I could live. And we live in this place of just constant birth and death, one thing feeding on another. So I don't want to just, you know, do some kind of metaphysical thing and say, oh, it isn't really happening, it's all an illusion, because that takes you out of the real inquiry, so that the answer isn't just an intellectual distraction to ignore the pain, but you actually fully enter into the mystery of this, the incredible, irreconcilable conflict of it. The answer lies in there. So I don't want to give a nice, cute little non-dual answer, or just say, well, this way God made it so we could tempt us, and then he's going to give us a reward later. I don't want to give you any kind of balm to make this easier for you, right? Yes, this is absolutely stunning. And yet this is what we as human beings must confront if we're going to truly wake up to our real nature. We must embrace experience as it is and not how we want it to be, even though simultaneously we are holding the way we want it to be, because it is that conflict, it is that dichotomy between the two that is the point of creative tension. This is where revelation breaks through. When you can't reconcile those two, you have to go somewhere else. Something inside has to split open. So I want to keep you there, eternal inside. Right? So that is the best answer I can give to that question, which is to stop trying to explain it away and just completely embrace it and see where it takes you, right? I mean, on a personal level, you know, I was talking earlier about my own addictions. I could, you know, I mean, really insane, stupid. I mean, you know, I could have ended up dead, right? But when I look, all of it conspired to bring me here. So it was horrible. It was horrific, but it brought me here. And I would have loved to think that I could have gotten here and up in a nice little, neat little path, and it would have been, you know, roses and dancing girls, and it all been very. It wasn't like that. Even after that monumental awakening I had on the bridge, and several afterwards, there was just one difficult thing after another, one challenging thing after another. And so I engage with life as it is. Don't say no to anything. Don't say no to anything. And then you can, you know, the Buddhist precept, do no harm, becomes living for you. Because Harm is being done all over the place. You see it. You have to accept it as part of it. But yet this other part says, well, why do that? And now you internalize it and go, well, I don't have to do that. You know, I can minimize it. I don't eat meat. That's one of the reasons why. There's many, but that's one. I don't eat meat. I don't need to do that, so I don't. Right? I have to eat plants, so I have to be grateful for the plants. You know, fruit's great because it's just a fruit. It drops off anyway, right? It's not, but plants, they live for a season anyway, right? It's not the same. It's not quite the same, but the essential mystery is still there. The human being is not self-sustained. It is sustained by something else, something outside of itself. That is a metaphor for the roots of the tree. The human being being the branches and the leaves, the roots being the divine nature that is the real source of it. Long-winded answer for you, eternal inside, but I hope it's satisfying, because it's if you really devote yourself to that question, not just want an answer to calm the distress of it, but actually thoroughly engage in the distress of it and realize this is the way it's been forever, and that everything we've done in our lives is an attempt to try to compensate for that, you're going to stand right on the edge of the infinite knowledge. So be willing to go there. Jaya Devan. I came across IR, Inner Reconciliation with Evan, on your channel and read the disclaimer in the description. It compelled me to read up on some psychological treatments. And I came to find out of how the awareness, did you continue, and acceptance of what happens now is the premise of all these treatments. Is there more to that? Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's right. You notice that psychological, energetic treatment, they're getting increasingly accepting of the human system rather than trying to force their will upon it. I look forward to the day when we are doing that with our politics and economics and governments and people. Instead of forcing our will upon them, we're just acceptant. We're acceptant. Is that right? Accepting of things they are, and working with the energy as it is. It's the insight that led me to what I now call inner reconciliation, and my approach to it. But you see it other places. It's actually appearing everywhere. It's some of the language I've been using for 20 years. I now see popping up in different places, and I'm going, oh my goodness, look at that. Yeah, because it's just true. It's just true. It was oppression and self-rejection that causes the trauma and all the misery in the first place. Well, then it's going to be acceptance and love that's going to cure it. End of story. To me, it's just like so simple and self-evident. I just wonder why it's taken us so long to see it. But our culture and our religions are all rule-based, right? When you lose the goddess, right? When you lose the Gaia, when you lose the sense of connection with nature, you replace it with rules, cold, empty rules, and rules have to be enforced, right? So the feminine principle gets diminished, the masculine principle gets aggrandized, and it's just this raw, stupid power. So everything becomes enforced rather than something growing out of your nature. Completely different perspectives on the world. And unfortunately, we are stuck in this one right now. But you see it happening. Satsang is one example of it. Energy healing is another example of it. All the way through psychology, all sorts of things are becoming transformed by just through self-acceptance, unconditional love. So hope that has meaning for you, Jai Devon. John David, how do you get over the intellectual wall? Well, well, I think what you're really saying is that how do I experience more of what I'm seeing, and I can articulate with my mind. Remember, the mind isn't creative; it's not making something up, right? So it isn't really doing the deed. It's simply taking an insight that you had, putting it into the context that it already has, right? And then, giving words and story to it. That's what it is. Recognize that at the essence of your experience was an insight that was not intellectual. It wasn't something the intellect arrived at. It's something that bubbled up. It was a spontaneous event. It was a virgin birth. It was a cosmic happening, right? Once it happened, of course, it's going to influence the system. And usually first it hits our minds because we're so used to using our minds. We're thinking about it. We find words. Sometimes you can have an insight. Well, like mine, when I was 19, I had no context for it whatsoever. So I started reading things, right? Starting with the Bible and all sorts of things about the Bible because it's the only spiritual tradition I knew. But eventually it branched out into other areas. But the essence of it was always an insight, right? So when you see something to be true, you begin conforming your thoughts to it. You'll notice that thoughts that were there before you realized, before you had that insight, are still there. They still keep going. You kind of, wait a minute, I thought I had this insight. Well, that shows that the intellect, the process of thinking, is not the insight. That the insight is an influence on it. But the insight has something that the thinking doesn't. Namely, it's true. And you know it's true. But the knowing it's true is not intellectual. That's not the mind. It's worked out all the, click, check, check. Yep, it's true. It's a spontaneous. You see it, you know it, it's true, all at once. Right? The three are actually one. That's what makes it an insight. That's what makes it an aha moment. I mean, I love the fact that Einstein said that the special theory, I think it was the special theory came first, theory of relativity, came to him in a flash. It took him 2 years to put all the math and everything together to actually give expression to it. 2 years to find the expression, but he knew it was true. He didn't arrive at it by doing all sorts of formulas and coming and seeing, and eventually, there it is, true. It was boom, true. And then it went back and created a language and an intellectual structure to give it expression. So your insight is not coming from the intellect. It is coming to the intellect. Then the intellect is, whatever your capacity is. Some people have a great intellectual capacity. Some don't have so much, right? Whatever that capacity is now can be now put to the task of giving meaningful, subtle, and nuanced expression to an insight that was sudden and and doesn't need words, right? We need words in order to express it. Next, at the next step after that, would be the more you're seeing that it's true, the less you can be fooled by something not being true, the more deeply it begins to sink into the whole nervous system, because the patterns of the intellect along certain patterns that you had thought before the insight dawned are still there. What you believed to be true prior to that has governed behaviors and feelings, perceptions and experiences. So that's all still going on, right? So even though you may have this great aha moment, life is still happening as if you didn't. Right? And this is a challenge everybody faces, because you go, wow, what happened? I was on retreat and I saw God and everything was on ayahuasca, and I saw God and everything was wonderful. And then the next day I was just crashed. Everything is horrible. I'm miserable and I hate everybody. And it's like, where is that? Right? It can be very, very confusing. The insight is real. Right? So now it's a matter of beginning to honor it, to love it, to cherish it, to live with it, to even to start embodying it. Oh, I am Buddha nature. That is, I haven't seen it. In fact, right now, I don't even know where to look, but something inside me says, this is correct. This is right. And that will take you through the intellectual wall, because it's not a wall at all. The intellect then becomes a tool to the awakened insight, as does the emotions, as do the sensations, as do the actions, until your life is that. Every aspect of your life is the vision embodied. The word becomes flesh and dwells among us. How's that, John David? Is that good? Is that good for you? Is that good for you? Okay, I got to get some more water. I'll be right back. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah. Sorry about that. I talk so much. I gotta keep myself hydrated. One more thing I wanted to say about intellect is that it does become a tool. Notice, I mean, I'm using it right now, right? And I've got pretty good intellectual equipment that I have refined and worked on. I've also gotten lost in thought. I've gotten thinking that I understood something when I actually didn't, kind of tricking myself into it. So it's a tricky business, but it's part of what's needed, really precise reasoning. Atmananda referred to it as higher reasoning, which is the capacity for enormous intellectual honesty, right? To really be willing to look at things. And that looking at things, then what you see is then reflected back, and it can be expressed in words, it can be expressed in concepts and intellect and art. Art's better at it actually even than words are. Mythology is all that. Is this metaphor, the expression of the inexpressible in form. So, where was I? Sally. Hi, it's Sally from Southeast England. Hi, Sally. Good to see you. Does yoga mean union? If so, union with what? And how is this associated with physical yoga? There are 6 paths of yoga. Some that involved the mind, some that involve service, some that involve detachment from results, mind training, devotion. Yeah, yoga means union with being, with your true self. And there are paths for getting back to what you've always been, right? Which is always the bottom line. And hatha yoga is one of those. But, just like a question earlier about Tantra, how Tantra in the West got reduced to sex, yoga in the West got reduced to exercise. So if you say yoga now, everybody just thinks of yoga. Now I got hot yoga and laughing yoga and goat yoga and vinyasa and Bikram and just a million different flavors, and they're all exercises. A couple of minutes of meditation, a meditation at the end. Well, that's actually quite a dilution of what yoga was. Physical yoga was only a preparation for other kinds of deeper inquiry and deeper practices. Yoga, and I like to use that word because it is a practice, it is a posture, it's a stance, it's a place that you go to take the position of. If you take the position that you are the true self, well, that's your yoga, that's your asana, right? And it has that kind of a characteristic to it of taking this position. And just like, if you've done yoga, and clearly you have, if you do the hatha yoga, there's a lot of yogas that are moving a lot, right? Those aren't, the original yoga was hatha yoga, where you were in a pose and you stayed in that pose, because the whole point of staying in the posture was to become increasingly sensitive to the subtleties going on in the body until you found the distractions, all the different, until the body was unified with a single focus, its single purpose. And that's when the poses get very strong, they get very powerful, right? So from that point of view, the posture of being the separate self, or what often I also call the yoga of allowing, which a term I coined. When you first start taking that posture, even though you realize that it's true, right? Your whole life has not harmonized with that yet, right? Just like, trying to do, stand on one foot, a tree pose or something, eventually you're solid as a tree. You're just absolutely solid as a tree, right? And the same thing applies here. So it's really pointing not to the physical, but to the spiritual. Now, that said, yoga is a progressive path. It is not Vedanta. It is not the direct path. It is a path of development and subtlety and nurturing and nuance. That's good, right? But we just have to be really clear, because I do yoga. I like to do yoga. I do other kinds of exercise as well. I like to be clear, it is not Vedanta. It is not non-dual inquiry, which is not concerned with a process to get somewhere, but who is the one going through the process, right? This one that's going through who is that? Who are you, right? You don't need any preparation to ask that question, right? And the more you ask it, the deeper it gets. When you really, really want to know who you really, really are, it kind of consumes you. The curiosity just consumes you, and you want to spend time with the inquiry. So, does that answer your question about all the different kinds of yogas? Because they're all, they all represent this same thing. The practice of the posture of being who you really are. And it's quite valid. But I just always want to make sure I draw the distinction between direct and progressive paths, because they're very different. And the progressive path eventually has to come to the direct path, right? because as long as there's a path and there's somebody walking on it, there's some kind of a destination. So eventually the path itself has to be questioned, every path. Arby says, will ever be a time when the entire world becomes conscious? Turn size with Trump's president, Arby, things we're way far off. I don't think we're as far off as you think. One of the symptoms of becoming conscious is when all of the dark material lurking in our that was before unseen and unacknowledged comes to the surface. A character, a depraved character like Trump, and not just him. I mean, he's basically a comic version of it. I mean, the real guys, some of the CEOs like Goldman Sachs and the like. I mean, these guys are out to enslave the world. That's what they're out to do. They want to be the kings and emperors of the world. That's the dark side of all of us. That is the unconscious side. The separate self, when limits are taken off of it, right? Because it's the limitation, right? When that is off, you're no longer limited because you're not the separate self. But as long as you're identified with the separate self, taking off limitations, you are going to seek power. You're going to seek to control others. And that's really what we are seeing. Unconsciousness, the ego, having its last dance, because what's the ultimate it can do? Complete and total self-annihilation. And that's what it's brought itself to. So while what we see happening in the world is so egregious, it is the unconscious becoming conscious. It is the ugly stuff. I mean, every president probably, every president has been exactly like Trump, just knew how to hide it, knew how to play the game better, didn't think they could just get away. They were much wiser in how they did it, but there's not really that much difference. You know, even the ones we really idealized, you know, I mean, Clinton made a mess of things, so did Obama. Obama kept up the wars, improved the nuclear arsenal, like all the while, you know, looking like this savior. I mean, he sold out too. They all did, right? So Trump is just obvious because he's such a buffoon and he has no morals. He believes in nothing but himself. So, so what we are seeing, here's the best way to look at it. You've got a Donald Trump in you. Good. Yep. Every one of us has a narcissistic, selfish, willfully ignorant, wanting to have everything their own way, childish, infantile one inside of us. And we just are now getting to see exactly how destructive that is. That is the nature of the separate self. Right? That's what it does. And so when I see these things happening in the world, yes, it's deeply troublesome. Will the world ever become conscious? Well, if you are becoming conscious, then the world is becoming conscious, because the fact is you can't separate the two. There's not you and then there's a world. You and your world are one. You're conscious, your world is conscious. See it like that. And then see everything unconscious that's popping up, like the state of the world and leaders and Putin and Trump and and Netanyahu and on, Boris Johnson, go on, and the list goes on and on and on, are symptoms of the unconscious. They are the aspects of yourself that you have yet to own. You still see the universe as out there, something to fix or get something from, and that you're here. It's not true. You are the world. You become conscious. You make your life about becoming conscious, and you will, if I be lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men unto me. That's what Christ said, and I think that says it better than I could. So my goodness, I have a lot of questions and not that much time. All right, let's see what I can do here. I love you, G, and all the beautiful people here. October Paul, love you too, Paul. Wonderful. Great, says Sketch. Vaniashi has retracted the message 3 times now. Maybe you'll get me a question at some point. Robin Pepper says, quote, not trying to get anything. It's all outward flowing love. Salah. Thank you. Yeah, beautiful. Sting. Wooter says, gee, hey, Wooter. Janet kept knocking it out of the park. Oh, keep knocking it out of the park, Chief. Keep lessons. Thank you. Wooster, any tips for books about what Jesus really said, spoke, tried to convey? Whoa. Well, I know of one, but it's an epic, and it's called What Jesus Really Said, I think is the name of it. But it's like 500-600 pages. It's very scholarly, but it does actually break down to the statements that have been attributed to him. How many did he really say? What did he really say? And it's like 35%. They think he said 13. They're sure. There's only 13% of all the things that have been attributed to him that they're really sure that he said. And we're even talking about phrases, entire sentences, where there may be like 3 or 4 words that he actually said, and then all this other stuff got added on by various points of view, by various factions, by people trying to make their point, simply by somebody, mistaking one word for another. Remember, these things were all copied by hand. Remember, some monk with a hangover, right? And what was that? I don't remember, right? That's kind of a scholarly thing. I couldn't get through the entire thing. A friend of mine gave me a copy of it, and I read some of it. I couldn't get through the entire thing. Other than that, the way I came to know it was I just realized that it was the Holy Spirit, it was grace, it was truth that was revealing itself, and it began to show me the deeper meaning of what Christ actually represented. There's also another place you can look, or just the books from. This is a really good one that's helpful. It's called Myths to Live By, Joseph Campbell, and it's a collection of essays and talks that he gave, and he has a lot to say about the meaning of Christ mythologically, all of the mythological material that got around, that put around, not true, like the virgin birth, right? And no such thing. It never happened. It wasn't even in the Jewish tradition, that kind of thing. That came from the Greek, that came from the Greek, because it was a huge Greek influence at the beginning of that. So I'm kind of getting off, but I'm just trying to racking my mind of places. I don't think everybody's asked that question before, because everybody says, at least in our culture, everybody says they know what he meant, right? It's the kind of thing that the more you understand that when Jesus spoke, as when Buddha spoke after he became Buddha, that he spoke as the true self. So when he's saying the word I, he's not referring to this human being wandering around. He's referring to the true self. That's why he could say, I and my Father are one. I of myself can do nothing, right? He was constantly drawing that distinction. He said, Peter, if you've seen me, you have seen the Father. Now, this is mysticism. This is mystic, right? There's a beautiful line in the Gospel of Thomas that I absolutely love, and Christ says, "He who drinks of my mouth shall become like me, and I shall be him." Whoa! I mean, that's Buddhism. That's Zen. He who drinks of my words shall become like me, and I will be him. Now, when he becomes you or you become him, that is, you become the self, consciously identified with that, then every word, you hear it everywhere. You can easily discern what did Jesus say and what he really didn't say, what was true, what wasn't true, because you're no longer seeking it, you're it. You are the criteria by which truth and falsity are judged. You are that which is, you're the Tao. You are beyond all the opposites. So all the opposites appear to you. Does that answer it for you, Wooter? Sorry, I can't actually point you to some actual books. Maybe I ought to write one, huh? I did do a class a long time ago called The Christian Mystic. I've always wanted to kind of just transcribe it and put it out there. And as a part of that, I did like 4 or 5 different interpretations of various stories, like the Tower of Babylon and the virgin birth and all of those kinds of things, explaining metaphorically what they meant, why these myths arose. And also why people took them so literally, became, rather than being an expression of something transcendent, they became a final term in and of themselves. And hence that's where creativity stops and fundamentalism begins. Delgado, IGP, if consciousness is the one who creates everything and free will doesn't exist as we think, why do we sometimes hear some teachers suggest that attention creates our reality, as if we are the ones doing it with our free will? Would you be able to explain the similarities, differences of attention and awareness? Are they the same thing? Thank you very much, Love and Light. Okay, well, if we had about 2 hours, I'm actually, at the end of the month or sometime in November, I'm planning on doing a class. And the class is called The 3 Powers of Creation: Attention, Belief, and Identification. And it will be talking about that, how the experience of creation takes place. And attention is kind of like a flashlight, right? It's aware of what's in it. It doesn't mean nothing else exists, but attention focuses, right? If you've got a good attention, creative people tend to, artists and like, get very into what they're doing, but also people who work with mathematics and complicated stuff like that, computer programs, even accountants working with numbers, anywhere where it really takes focus, you'll notice that the world's gone, right? That's all there is. Now, it's all still there, of course, right? It's all available to awareness, but in this particular moment, the only information that is being transmitted or received is coming from where the flashlight happens to be. This is how magic works. This is how the illusion works. They call it misdirection. So I'm doing something very expertly, right? I'm drawing people's attention to focus on what I want them to focus, and I can do all sorts of stuff here, and they won't see it, simply because you focus their attention so thoroughly that anything outside now is gone. And they can make trucks disappear, right? Because you're not actually seeing it happen, right? It's happening right in front of you. And then we go, oh, it's magic, right? No, it's not. It's not. It's the nature of intention, right? Now, the question of free will gets really interesting, and I hadn't thought about adding that into that class when I do it, but it's a good thing to do. When I say, what is it that focuses attention? The focus of our attention is actually a product of our beliefs, right? And our beliefs are not a matter of free will. You did not choose your beliefs. They were installed in you, right? Now, our everyday experience, we can say, yeah, I chose this, I decided to do this. And everyday conversation, and in conventional terms, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing inaccurate about that. It's not that it's, that it's false. But when we look at it existentially, when we look at it from the point of view of a direct inquiry, because we're trying to find out what's ultimately true, not what's just apparently true here, not what's just convenient and useful, but what's the ultimate truth here, we find that what we actually experience is there's awareness of an intersection. Oh, this go this way, this way, this way. The body, mind is this way, and that way. And then at some point, a choosing thought arises, and off it goes in this way. Now, if you really look at it closely, you can't find a chooser. You can't find the free will. What you find is a flow of thought and experience. Right. And where's that coming from? Well, it's just arising out of, it's a modulation of consciousness. And what form does it take? It just takes the form of whatever the most dominant belief is, right? And so something would come, I want to go this way and this way. There'd be a conflict. In most human beings, there's a conflict between safe, don't change, stay the same, and get a reward, freedom, have more. And there's a little conflict with that. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, a choosing thought happens. We feel content. And then a few thoughts later, we go, I chose that. Which is just another thought. All of it is simply the way life happens to be appearing in front of conscious awareness. There's no one making a choice. There's only the experience of choosing. Right? You see, it's very subtle. It's very subtle. Yeah. There is a choice, there is a choosing, but there's no chooser. The chooser is imaginary. It is projected onto the experience of simply this happening as opposed to that happening, right? And a thought that seems to participate in that process. And then somewhere down the line, a thought comes and says, I did that. It's just a thought. No, you didn't do it. It just happened. Attention and awareness. So attention, yes. Attention always appears in awareness, doesn't it? Are you not aware of your attention? And are you not aware that your attention wandered? You're not aware that here now it's really focused, and then it's off here, squirrel, right? You're aware of all of that. So attention is something that arises, moves, and subsides with an awareness. Awareness is constant. It never changes. Is that helpful? All right, I got 1 minute left. Let's see what I can get through here. Eli says hi from Whitewater, Wisconsin. Hello, Eli. Glad you're here. G, can you give a demonstration on teleporting, visualization on steroids? Interesting. God, I haven't done stuff like that in such a very long time. Now, Satsang's not the place for it, but I think there actually may even be, look up GP Walsh teleporting. There may actually even be I may have done a YouTube video on it, 5 years ago or something like that. Kelly. So hopefully that'll lead you in the right direction, and I'll think about kind of updating those if need be. Kelly, where did you go? Oops, just lost you. Just lost you. My goodness, I'm not going to be able to get to all these today. Aloha, GP. I took the Inner Reconciliation webinar, and I ended up not completely resolving the feelings that came up. I did some EFT after to clear the emotions and stuck energy. What do you recommend? It's, yeah, we don't want to clear the stuck energy until the entire thing has been revealed. Okay? Don't think that inner reconciliation is not therapeutic. It is transformational. It has therapeutic results, but that's not its purpose. It's not here to clear stuck energy. It is to get to the root of where that energy came from, reveal the essential disconnect with yourself that caused it, and reconnect you to it. That's the deepest spiritual transformation. That's what we're after. So go back to that. If those feelings are still there, go back and say, what more do you have to say to me? I'm listening. Notice you kind of shifted the position that, well, these things came up really good, and then immediately wanting to go away, right? And the whole point is, don't want them to go away. Matter of fact, you can tell when you are no longer in resistance if you can I can ask you the question, would it be okay if you had this feeling for the rest of your life and beyond? When you can honestly answer yes to that, you are now actually allowing. There's no resistance left. You are not, you've completely taken your hands off, right? So let it be an opportunity for you to go more deeply in your willingness to become transformed, to let yourself be opened. And, again, EFT can have a physical effect. It can actually calm you. And that can actually be deceptive because now, oh, I feel much better. I'm okay. But the thing is still there. So even use EFT to create the space in which whatever needs to come up can come up. Because it has to. If it doesn't, you're not done, right? So hopefully that answers it for you, Kelly. It's really a great one, but I just love to see this because I want people to just become adept at this, to not think, okay, I'm really gonna let go of my resistance as a kind of a bargaining chip to get the thing to go away. Right? That's not really letting go. That's not really allowing. That's not really acceptance. It's a subtle way of rejecting. And don't forget, it was the rejection of ourselves that caused all of our problems. The only thing that will cure them is acceptance of ourselves. Period. End of story. All right. Oh, I just keep going down the list here. Jags. Hi, GP. Thanks for holding a satsang again. I've heard on this path one can come to have certain powers, but I'm extremely skeptical. To be so kind to elaborate on this, thank you. Yeah, it happens. It can. It's also a distraction. A lot of people want the power. A lot of people actually seek spirituality to get power. They go through yogic practices to get what's called the cities, right? I think it's SIDDHI, something like that, cities. And these esoteric powers, the ego would love to get its hands on those. Right? And it is a place where it's easy to get, it's quite easy to get seduced. Some powers can arise, I used to be much more psychically sensitive, and I really thought I was pretty cool about it. And then eventually I realized, oh my God, no, I only need to know what I need to know. And now what I'm aware of what's going on in other people's hearts and minds is always within the context of bringing about healing and self-acceptance. So Yeah, I mean, there are people who try to move things with their mind. Once again, find out who you are first. That's all I say. Find out who you are first. Once you find that out, you won't have any interest in special powers. There won't be anything they can bring to you, but you might find that you have them. You might find that some special gifts take place, healing. Suddenly in your presence, people just get better, right? It'll be an opportunity for you to take personal ownership for it again and once again identify with the separate self. but it could happen. Find out who you are. Really, make that the most important thing in your life. And the rest will take care of it. The rest will take care of itself. Rohan says, when does this all stop feeling like such an effort? Well, if you recognize that everything that you're doing, everything you're listening to, all the practices that you've done, we're all inspired by the grace that is simply calling you home. You'll realize that it hasn't been you just efforting away, just laboring on. You're not Sisyphus pushing that stone up the mountain only to have it roll down again. You were brought here. Something is calling you. Truth has your number and is calling you, texting you, emailing you. Rumi said beautifully, the power that brought me here must bring me home. One of the problems with the non-duality and the like coming into the West is this sense of personal achievement and effort, which is just so characteristic of the West here. And so we burden ourselves with, I've got to do this. Right? Well, no, you don't. And the only reason you're even aware of this, the only reason you're here is because something has moved you, something brought you, right? Something is unfolding in you. And so you can begin to surrender more to that, trust more in that, make it less about the effort and just about the seeing, right? If you've got like some kind of a meditation practice and you have to, hold a gun to your head to make yourself do it, don't do that practice, If inquiry is inspiring to you, do it, right? If it's not inspiring to you, well, it would have to be inspiring to you, it wouldn't be here. But if it isn't, find out what is. Right? I mean, don't think you have to force yourself into any form. You're being called. Just turn inside and ask that voice, where am I being called to? Speak, Lord, for your servant hears. Rohan continues, it feels like the ego's last line of defense for this particular form is to become so exhausted, defeated, and apathetic. Lately, I have to literally fight to stay awake. I've developed a pathological demand avoidance as well. I face my pain, anxiety, and fears inside. I see them fully, but all action feels soft. False. I surrender. Good. Wave the white flag. It is very uncomfortable as we are awakening to feel the actions that are false, that haven't really been you, that haven't really been legitimate. But let this be an opening, a flowering of the heart, and not just an activity, an intense activity of the mind. Take care of yourself. Dance more, laugh more, make love more, hang out with friends more, walk in nature more. Pull back from the struggle of trying to wake up. Don't let that become a burden. Remove that burden from you, and so step back. Yeah. Just step back. Take a breath. Just kind of become intoxicated with this mystery of life. Even the wonder of efforting and confusion and all the things, just, my goodness, what a wonder. What is it? Where did all of this come from? I mean, wow. I mean, become fascinated with the mystery of thought and the patterns of thought and the illusions of thought and delusions that it's gotten stuck, and go, wow, look at that. This is miraculous. This is just stunning. And let that mystery, the mysteriousness of it, the entire mystical experience, begin to guide you. Because that opens, that's a seeing that's like, it's baffling. You just kind of go, it just brings out the power of wow, right? I call it the power of just wow. Really see that. We can get so focused on, I got to awaken, I got to awaken. We really just kind of tie ourselves into the same knot. So untie yourself. Untie yourself. You are more important than this process. You're more important than the inquiry. You're more important than any activity. You're more important than any practice. You are what's important. Just remember that, right? If it gets tense or feels heavy and burdensome, back off. Don't go there. Let yourself be kind of drawn out of this natural curiosity that what's real. Dave and Elaine, thanks for your answer on lucid dreaming and dream yoga, GP. Your insights and take on these subjects are always valued and appreciated. Love and light. Thank you, guys. Why does it feel so good to give up? Because you've just surrendered into your true being. Because when you give up, you're not affected anymore. You're not doing stuff anymore. You're not trying to make something happen. It's just you. That's what you feel like. Why does it feel good to give up? Because that's what you actually feel like. You're not feeling anything other than you, Elsa. That's why it feels so good. That's why it feels so good. It feels good to be yourself. Awareness simply feels. I mean, it feels. It is the bliss of eternal stillness in the heart of the activity of infinite life. Liz Love says, hi, GP. Hi, Liz. Rohan says, you have to be awareness for it to be effortless. Yes, it is effortless for awareness. So if you're not feeling, if it's feeling really burdensome and effortful, well, you've identified with the separate self. The separate self is trying to set itself free. It's trying to become aware. It's trying to wake up. You know, non-dual language has been commandeered by the separate self for its purpose. Right? So step back from that. Put a smile on your face. Got me again, bastard. Got me again. And take a step back, man. Have a good laugh. We're all pretty stupid here. The room looks peaceful. It is, isn't it? Yeah, this is my little monk cell. I do everything here. Work here, do my videos here, I sleep here. I don't eat in here. Obviously, there's more of the house than I do, but this is my, this is my life here. James Zimmerman, hey G, first time live. Jay-Z from Montgomery, Texas. Hi, G. Jay-Z, like that. Rohan says, until then, trying to stay aware of awareness is like trying to overcome the inertia of something that has no real mass, but the feeling the force anyway. Yeah, trying to overcome, staying aware of awareness. You don't have to stay aware of awareness. Drop that. That's attention you're referring to. That's this effort to try to keep attention focused. You don't care where attention goes. You don't care. And the moment you don't care, just let it go. It'll go, hey, nobody's paying attention. It'll come scurrying back home. It's the way it's the way it works. You are the awareness, right? That's the truth. and the truth never changes. So it's the truth that you are the awareness that's bringing the attention back to the reality of who it is. Mary Sykes, so are you talking about our shadow side? Yeah, that's a good way. That's another way of putting it. That's a psychological way of putting it. You know, if you want to do it a spiritual way, it's, you know, you're talking about the egoic mind. If you want to look at it truly in the entire picture, everything we experience is this conflict between the egoic mind and the true self. The ego, you know, boasting that it is somebody. So yeah, you can call it the shadow side. That's fine. The important thing is to not just say, "Oh, those bad people over there," right, and dismiss them, because you've just made the separation between yourself and the world. And if we're going to heal anything, we have to become one with it, right? We're unifying with it. We're reconciling the opposites, which even them, you know, even the apparent scumbags, right? So yeah, shadow side is another word you could use for it. That was for Jung's term, the shadow. This love. I think a case for Christ was a good watch. Case for Christ. Oh, a case for Christ. Was that like a movie or a Netflix or something like that, or YouTube? Janet McGowan. Hi, GP. Thanks for a great satsang. You're the constant gardener. Yeah, more out there at home. Feeling blessed. Quick question. Can we raise the consciousness of the planet through chanting or prayers? Do they raise your consciousness? If the answer is yes, then yes, you're raising the consciousness of the planet. Because one of the things, again, I really would love you all to come to the workshop I'm doing this Wednesday called Gaia's Dream. gpwalsh.com/Gaia donation. So, you know, if you don't have any money, it's great. If you really don't have any money, just let me know. I'll get you in. But I'm just asking for donations, anywhere up and down the scale, because I want to show that by waking up yourself, that it's not you and then you're going to wake up a world. You are the world waking up. There isn't any division at all. That's completely illusory. So you waking up and the world waking up are the same thing. You follow that? Your awakening and the awakening of the world are the same thing. It's not two. It is not you, an individual, waking up. It is the world waking up, and the manifestation of the awakening is the appearance of individuals awakening, and also the appearance of the deeper darkness becoming seen as darkness. It is awakening that awakens. Awakeness awakens to itself. Awareness becomes aware of itself. You are not waking and then the earth, then the world waking. The awakening is happening and you are a manifestation of that. So when you're drawn to prayer or chant, and I love to chant, I love to chant, and you know, kirtan and bhajans and things like that. They're wonderful. They're absolutely wonderful, and they raise the vibration. Of course, they raise, but that's transient. That's temporary, unless they are rooted in the deeper knowledge of that which does not need its consciousness to be raised. It is the utter truth of it all, right? And the truth does not need to be improved on. And that is what's driving the awakening. The truth is driving the awakening. The truth is manifesting itself as an awakening world for the pure joy of witnessing the awakening. Ah, love that question. Delgado, thank you very much. You're welcome. Dave Rose, namaste. Eva, thank you for satsang. Much light and love to you. Oh, guys, 20 minutes over. Okay. Thanks for this, GP. As always, so well explained. I tend to find I really love the idea of how the same conscious awareness manifests itself as you, GP, and the same time manifests as me and LC Dalek, that the same consciousness gets to experience itself as itself, by itself, through itself, us. You could say that we are not aware, only awareness itself is aware. Yes. Yes, you don't wake up. The guy in the dream doesn't wake up. You are the awakening itself. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Why does awakening bring about love and peace? Because when you're awake to who you are and the oneness of being, what else is there? I mean, if it didn't, it would mean that the one is eternally interconflicted, which means it's two. If you have one, you have internal unity, eternal harmony. What does that mean? You are one. You are love. That is what love is. And peace isn't just an agreement between people. Peace is the absolute stillness of background, of the background of everything. And that's love. Well, that's the principal love, which is the nature of being itself. And that manifests as loving people, loving experiences, loving relationships, harmony, community, working together. That's the manifestation of love. But there couldn't be a manifestation of love if there wasn't love, which exists in the transcendent. So you could say that love, just think of the love as the feminine aspect of emptiness, the emptiness being the male aspect of the Vedanta and the Tantra. Ember, hey G, that last talk you held was incredible, and I loved the direct approach. I've been feeling a shift from conceptual understanding to a deeper understanding, integration. Thank you so much. No, Ember, thank you. Wow, thank you. That is what I want to hear. If you don't mind, I may actually take this, if I could take this little quote, I'm going to copy it right now. Take this little, if I can use that and attribute to you. This is great. Janet McGowan says, wow, X. Thank you, Janet. Amber Wooter, a book called Mary Magdalene Revealed may interest you. Just ordered it yesterday. Oh, yeah, good. Thanks for your time, GP. Peace. Also gives hearts. Wonderful. And we come to another end of that which has no end. A moment, a transition. So I hope you all join me on Wednesday. There'll be a replay available, of course, if you can't make it live. But this is the subject I just love going into. So I hope you'll all be with me. In the meantime, remember who you are. The truth of the matter is you can't forget because the truth is what you are. And it is sustaining it. So even the thought I could forget isn't true. It's just a thought. How can you possibly forget who you are? How can you become something other than what you are? What you are does not depend on whether you think it or not. So you are the self. Thank you all. I love you. Namaste.